Hey everyone, welcome to another session of In the Studio with Brad. And I have some fun stuff to show you this week. Uh, Let me see. I will have to warn you folks. Been kind of a rough week for me. Just a little bit of food poisoning, I think. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe a summer cold. I'm not sure what, but let's just say that I'm not exactly going to blow you out of the water with my incredible eloquence this week, but I will do my best. And hopefully I can make the next 4 hours or so entertaining. So what have we got to show you out with? Those of you who tuned in last week, you'll recall that I was working for something for a project for Goodman Games, which I'm still not allowed to tell you what the title is. So give me a second while I cover up the title. Think. How's that? There we go. As you recall, I only got about half of this inked. And I decided to leave this as a pure black and white piece for once. Sometimes I'll go in with maybe some mechanical shading or some grayscale watercolors, but I kind of liked how this was just boom, hi, this is pure black and white. So we got that. This is something that will probably give some of you a giggle. I think I mentioned that I have done some work with the Gong Farmer's Almanac, and this is one of my contributions for this coming year. It is Mother Hydra. As you can see, she's only partially inked so far. Hopefully by this time next week, she will be done, depending on what the rest of my work schedule looks like. Now, I don't think I showed you either of these last week. This is going to be for Dungeon Denizens. And this is I think it's called a giant scorpiopede. Here, I'm going to turn it like this so you can see better. And this is rendered in watercolor with some touches of Professor Martin's Pro White to give a nice hard gleam. When I dropped it onto the scanner, I actually did an overlay of like maybe 10% yellow just to give it a little bit of richness. That's a trick a lot of artists use. They just add a little bit of yellow to pretty much everything. So, and now this fellow. Hold on, let's see if I can get this up a little bit higher so you can see it all. This, I guess, is a heap man made of snow. They're kind of like, I was joking that he's Frosty's evil twin, but minus the goatee, because the idea of an animated pile of snow walking at you wearing a goatee would that just be plain silly? So, what have we got on the docket for this week? Here we go. I will let you back down here. So as most of you know, Goodman Games is getting ready to release the 5th edition version of their infamous Curse of the Devil Lich sourcebook or adventure. Now, for those of you who are not at all familiar with it, Curse of the Devil Lich started many, many moons ago when Goodman Games was still doing just stuff to support 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. And they had the fun idea that they wanted to do their version of Tomb of Horrors. So there you go. Make sure you have extra characters on hand when you start this adventure, kids. It's gonna be ugly. Oops, sorry, my bad. Okay, there. These are called Midnight Witches, and they're kind of like the night hags from D&D, like the Black Annis and such, only kind of on steroids. Because, a normal, cannibalistic sorceress witch that lives in a swamp isn't bad enough as is. You got to kind of pick up the pace a bit. So there you go. Now, since this is going to be for Curse of the Devil Lich, and I've done all my other artwork for that as kind of a combination of, the pure black and white here and some grayscale, I'm going to try and keep my line work a little bit cleaner and a little bit simpler to give room for the paints. So there we go. That is that. Trying to make some nice dramatic lighting. I think I need to switch to a slightly smaller nib. There we go. I think. Nope. Hold on. There we go. Back to using the Windsors that my wife got me a couple weeks ago. Excuse me. I seem to have a frog in my throat, folks. There we go. Give me just a second, folks. I got to recaffeinate myself. If any of you ever have a chance to have my wife make iced tea for you, go for it. She makes the best iced tea in the world, I swear. Strong enough to keep you awake, but not so much that it's going to give you the caffeine jitters. I literally drink this stuff by the gallon. There was one time, and I am not joking, she made like this huge pot of it for me in early afternoon, and by like 9 o'clock it was gone. There we go. Cut it up, guys. Contrary to popular belief, coffee is not always your best friend when you're trying to do stuff like this. Coffee can actually make you very jittery, obviously. And that is kind of a problem if you're really trying to do the super duper detail work, which I like to think is kind of the hallmark of my style. So you need to find that little bit of measure of balance between keeping you going with the energy, but not getting fried out. There's a reason why I avoid Starbucks. There we go. There we go. Now, the fun thing is that the work order actually specified was that midnight hags are similar to night hags, but even more twisted and deformed. And I'm like, oh, great. Because I kind of looked on the internet and did a quick Google for midnight hags, and ooh, they ain't the prettiest things in the whole wide world, anyhow. So I'm supposed to make this thing look even worse. So it took me a little while to kind of figure out how I was going to do that. And night hags, as I'm sure some of you have Googled to find out, have horns on their heads, 2 of them. Okay, well, that's pretty traditional, They're kind of demonic beings, yada, yada, yada. So I'm like, what can I do to make these midnight hags that much worse? So I thought, let's see what happens if I can start having some horns coming out of some different places. Hence the fact that she has horns actually coming out of her chin. And I just thought, sorry. One of these days, I'm going to try and figure out a way to draw without my head in the room. But that just doesn't sound like a real good idea. What do you think, folks? On the other hand, you probably wouldn't have to listen to me as much. My head would maybe be out in the hallway, but still, Here we go. Now, one thing I thought was a little bit inspired on my part was night hags normally have, your normal, lips. I mean, they have big mouths with lots of fangs, but other than that, their mouths are fairly normal. And I was like, one thing that always looks nasty to me when I have to do them is how the teeth on things like crocodiles just grow like right out. They don't have lips or anything. They're just like, boom, hi, here's all our teeth. I thought that might be a way to tackle the midnight hag, and I think it came out rather nicely looking, or as nice as you can with this. And of course, warts, because she's a witch. Come on, you can only buck tradition so far. There we go. This really is a case of the devil is in the details. You want to make sure that you make a good, strong impression when you're, for the people who are just kind of flipping through it, or maybe have just bought it and they're trying to skimming through it, seeing what all they got. But then you want to give them enough that they're going to go, ooh, and hopefully some of these pictures, they'll go back to and like, that looked awesome. Okay, there we go. So now this one is coming together pretty easily. I didn't even particularly realize how tight I had gotten the sketch. There we go. And a nice gruesome looking horn protruding from her cheek, I guess. Hold on just a second. There we go. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I like to think of myself as kind of a horror guy. And a lot of the really great horror artists go for a very stylized look. Hans Bach, Lee Brown Coy. I mean, they're magnificent artists, but one problem I always had with them is, how do I want to say this? They're so stylized that almost the artwork becomes more by itself rather than selling the subject, for lack of a better way. And I kind of take the approach that the artwork has to, excuse me just a second while I lose my train of thought, switching. I like to make my scary stuff realistic enough that people don't just look at it like, oh, that's a cute drawing. It's like, you know, where did he find that subject matter? So here we go. I don't know why, but it always makes me feel lit. Think it makes something look a little bit creepier with these kind of skin blemishes like I'm drawing on her, to have a little bit of an almost outline around it. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But where the wart, or in this case, the horn, has literally pushed itself up and pushed some of the skin away. There we go. Now, and since this is fantasy, and I know I've talked about this before, you have a little bit, you don't have to be quite as precise with your shaping of things. Like if you notice, I haven't had to pull out the ruler at all yet in this illustration. Probably I won't have to at all. There we go. Some nice wrinkles. You know, at least you don't have to put me talking about, oops, sorry, like happy trees or anything. I am not Bob Ross. And I'm not sure, you know, like just put a happy little, you know, wart here. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of funny to hear someone like Bob Ross, you know, doing an illustration of like this. I mean, I think the commentary would be quite entertaining. There we go. Hold on just a second, guys. Okay, now Let's do this other horn up here. And no, I am not going to call it a happy little horn because that's just wrong. I don't know, does Bob Ross even do his show anymore? Or did he like kick off? I don't remember. Go. Okay, now where am I? Where am I? Probably make this thing have a lot more skin blemishes and such, but I think a lot of those I'm going to wait until I'm actually painting it. Oops, sorry. There we go. Because that way I can control the absolute like look factor. There we go. All right, hold on. There we go. There we go. I would say she's starting to come together rather, I wouldn't say nicely though, guys. One of these days I'll have to do a picture from some of my less tight sketches and show you how much sometimes that it is just a matter of improvising as you go. As you can see from this, there's really not a whole lot of improvising and figuring out what I'm drawing as I'm going, but I have to do. I've got this to pretty tight pencils. There we go. Let me see. Sorry, had a brain fart. There we go. Now, she and her sister here are supposed to be lurking in this mist-filled cavern. So what I will probably do when I am done ink, and I've done painting it, I will slap it on into Photoshop, and I actually have some mist effects, which is makes my life a lot simpler. Mist and a lot of natural phenomena, like not like that, like clouds and fire and waves, are very, very awkward to do unless you have photo reference. And mist in particular is bad because it's semi-transparent, which means it's hard to recreate those effects in black and white, pure black and white like this, or even in normal with normal paints. So I find it's just much more effective just to have a basically a brush ready to go where I can adjust the transparency, the shape of the brush. Also, since it's in Photoshop, if I finally decide at the end, it's like, oh, maybe I don't want mist at all in here, this picture, I can just go ahead and delete that layer. Boom, and it's gone. And no harm, no foul. Okay, there we go. Give that a little bit more of a sense of roundness. There we go. There we go. You can never have too many wrinkles when you're drawing a monster like this. It's physically impossible. Hold on 1 second, I will get it out. There we go. Sorry. That was kind of an improvised thing, but I decided I'd give her a vein kind of on her cheek there. There we go. And there we go. Hold on. I got to gather my thoughts for just a second, folks. I think for next week, I'm going to see if I can get the assignment to be a little spot below that I can get further on. And I can maybe show off a few more techniques than the normal just hatching and cross hatching that I've been showing you. There we go.
So I have a question for you because you were drawing such a wonderfully, delightfully horrific thing. Um,
Okay.
what is your favorite monster?
Uh, I personally like to draw zombies because they've got 1 foot in a reality that we understand, but then also you can basically twist that imagery in some really horrific ways. And because it's got, like I said, 1 foot in reality, it's more effective. I feel it's more effective for giving people the creeps. Like, nobody's ever seen an actual dragon. Okay. But if I draw somebody, well, like to use an example, um, an illustration I did for Bloat Games had a guy that basically one arm was falling off, his stomach was hanging out, his head was twisted basically at a 45, no, more like a 60-degree angle. You get the whole thing. But he was obviously wearing a perfectly normal pair of jeans. And that kind of like, to my mind, that kind of helped drive the horror. It's like, this is a monster home. This is not something from fantasy. This is like a, oops, something went wrong with our reality. Um, Another time I drew a zombie even worse than that and had it set in standing in front of a strip club. I mean, you could see the marquee behind him, but there was this, you know, with his guts hanging down by his ankles. And I kind of like to say, like, go ahead, Hollywood, you try and do this monster on the cheap. Like I said, when you there was another monster zombie I did. I showed her basically with what must have been like a chainsaw wound going from her shoulder basically almost to her opposite waistline. With all her internal organs basically flopping out. So does that answer your question, kids? I mean, I actually have people who come to me primarily because I draw the best, really great zombies. And the fun thing is, I don't even watch shows like The Walking Dead. I personally find them very. There we go. Hold on. I gotta find a super duper duper fine pen. There we go. Any other questions, folks? I mean, I can go on about zombies if you want, but
I'm not seeing any pop in the chat at the moment.
Hmm. Oh, that's no fun. I know everybody's at Little League practice tonight. There we go.
Jess is asking, what about puppy dogs? Do you like drawing them?
Oh, absolutely. The funny thing is, I've been drawing scary stuff since literally before I can actually remember about it. I grew up in a real small town where basically we had the same art teacher from kindergarten basically through 8th grade. And Mrs. McKee kept samples of my artwork whenever I wouldn't take them home. And yeah, it's just like, sheesh, did I draw all this stuff? But hey. But actually, I used to be confused the hell out of some of my art professors in college because they had no way of they could not understand how I could do the stuff that I draw, and so casually. I actually was sitting in one of my freshman, I think it was freshman art classes, where the professor, he did a fair amount of like, hey, this is how we do artwork and such, but he also would be giving us lectures on the concepts of paint, of oil paint, so on and so forth. And I'm sitting there taking notes but drawing in the margins at the same time, and he just kind of like stops, like, Brad, how the hell can you be doing this without any models? What do you mean? You're not looking at anything, you're just drawing these monsters without any photo reference. I don't know, I can, I guess. which I don't know what that says about the inside of my head, but such is life. But yeah, this was a guy that actually had his doctorate in art education, and he just could not wrap his head around what I do. And that was probably, well, I would have been 18 or 19. So that was over 30 years ago, kids. There we go. Ooh, hold on. There we go. Do some nice ghastly detail work on the teeth. Hold on, I've got to fill in a space here. I just spotted, I realized that I missed. Give me a second, guys. I'll be back on the real job here. There we go. And that is that. There we go. That's better. I swear I'm going to break out my acrylic paints and color code these pens so I'm not having to look at the lids all the time and hoping that I got the right lid on the back on the right pen, because this gets annoying at times. There we go. Oh, here we go. I missed a spot. Obviously, being a midnight hag does not qualify you for dental. There we go. Ghastly. There we go. Oh. Oops, grabbed the wrong one. See, told you. Gotta draw the shadow on the far side of its nose. Hold on just a second, guys. There we go. The infamous X. Go. I didn't really bother doing with the arrows this time, but I have a pretty clear vision of where I want the light coming from on this one. So if you notice, all the shadows kind of fall heading this way. There we go. Some nice clunky details on the horns here, especially as they start heading away from the light source. There we go. There we go. Let's give her another ward right here, just for entertainment's sake. Okay, now. Sorry. And I still have to do her sister in the background here yet too. But I wanted to do a nice close-up of at least one of the hags so you could get the facial details. Okay. Since part of her sister will be lost in the mist, I won't go into as much detail drawing her. I figure I've got a good amount of detail going on in this one to balance out the two. Okay, let's see here. You know what? I'm just going to go like that and save myself a bit of time. There we go. Let's do the shading on her secondary set of horns here. What the hell? I'll just go ahead and do this right now while I'm thinking about it. Doesn't take that long, folks. There was a while there I got real lazy, and like almost anything that had to have any sort of fill like that, I just kind of like close it in, draw next. Okay, we'll take care of it on the computer. But I've kind of gotten back to wanting to have more or less a finished looking piece of artwork from the word go. Okay, there we go. Some nice luxurious hair detail. There we go. Whew. Let me see, what am I doing? What am I doing? Actually, I need to do her eyebrows. There we go. Actually, maybe a couple other hairs here. And I'll probably highlight those a little bit better with a real fine line with the professor, with the pro white. go. That looks better. TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. There we go. Sorry. Not shockingly, this is not the first time I've had to draw, or even the second or third time, I don't think, that I've had to draw something like this. Black Anises, or which is kind of like the inspiration for Midnight Hag, is the inspiration for Night Hags, and thus the inspiration for Midnight Hags, are an old, I want to say British or Celtic folklore thing. Don't remember exactly where it's from, but yeah, they'd live in a swamp, and they'd steal your kids away if they could. I forget who the last time I had to draw a hag like this was for. I think at this point in my career, I've probably filled up a couple monster manuals worth of critters. Yeah, this is 0.5. There we go. She is almost done. But like I said, I still have to do the other one, and I still have to lay the paints on. But in all likelihood, unless something happens, I should have this all for you to enjoy by this time next week as a fully painted piece. Okay. Just because I'm getting a little bit frazzled on her, I'm going to do just a little bit of the background here. There we go. Oh, here's another tool that my wife found for me after I asked her about them, courtesy of Amazon. It's called a Kuretake, and it is a brush pen, again, from Japan, as I don't think you can see the kaji here. I have no clue what this actually says. All I know is it's from Japan. And they're great because they have incredibly versatile brushes. And this is just like one size brush, but you can shape it to be almost anything. There we go. And the cartridges that it uses last forever. I've been using this same cartridge for about 3 months now, and it's only now starting to get a little bit low. So aspiring artists would do worse than getting these. I know they have some of them at typical craft stores that, sound a lot like Robbie. I'm not gonna say anything beyond that. But they're not very expensive, and they're wonderfully versatile. There we go. Now, I'm not putting pretty much any detail into the roof of this because some of this will be obscured by the mist once it is, once I'm done playing with it in Photoshop. There we go. Oops, sorry. Was my head in the way? My bad. What's that? Okay. There we go. Now, one problem that took me a while to figure out the easiest way to get around it was, if you notice, I've been using like 3 or 4 different pens here, which unfortunately also sometimes translates to 3 or 4 or more different types of ink in the same drawing. Now, that doesn't sound like it should be a problem, but what can happen is you end up with different opacities of ink, and then that can become a problem. So what I found eventually I had to do was I would scan a picture in normally, and I do it at, and I think I've mentioned this before, 600 DPI, which is 360,000 bits of information per square inch of the drawing. If that gives you an idea of how detailed it can possibly be. But I always scan it in as grayscale. And what happens, all these weird different densities of ink translate to a variety of different levels of opacity in the drawing. So some will be really nice and black, and some, especially if I'm using, like one of these suckers from Walmart, the ink might not be very dense. So what I found I had to do to get that to kind of level the playing field, once I scan it in as a grayscale, which does preserve all those different levels of shading, I'd make sure everything looks the way I want it to, and then I convert it into what they call bitmap. And probably a lot of you are familiar with bitmaps because it's like, ground zero or level 1 of any sort of artwork. It is literally just black and white. Like, if you were to look at this picture and you were to scan it as grayscale, you would get the white here, and you get several different shades of black, but then you'd also get literally dozens or more shades of gray from the pencil. So what converting it to black and white bitmap does is it forces all those different layers or different opacities of ink to one. It's either pure black or pure white. So it's just one of those things you learn how to do.
Speaking of Photoshop, we do have one question from Grunk Healy Man. It says, how much time roughly does an average piece of this size take in like Photoshop or post processing?
Depends on how much I plan on doing in Photoshop. Like this piece, I'll have, with any luck, I'll have it completely erased, have it cleaned up. The post processing in Photoshop to get it ready to print might only take like 15 minutes tops. Once it's painted, then it can be anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours, depending on what all you're doing. Like this, once I get it scanned, printed, painted, rescanned, probably about all I will have to do is do the framing box and import the mist effects and then erase the excess mist effects, slap my signature on it, and it'll help. With any luck, it'll be out the door in an hour or so, hopefully. So it really kind of depends on what all I'm doing. Now, sometimes I will get a little bit overly ambitious. And then, yeah, tomorrow morning I might get the picture done. Oops. I found it's generally not a good idea to measure too much in terms of how much time it takes me to do things, or I start really start thinking it's like, is this really a good idea to be trying to do this? I could be making more money at McDonald's. But I will tell you this, I can't think of anything else I would rather be doing because even though I sometimes kvetch and I complain, you know, you think this is fun? Try doing this at 4 o'clock in the morning because the picture is due by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. But I'd still rather be doing this than working at an office or something. I've done the office thing, and it is in my opinion, it is every bit as soul crushing as the jokes go. Also, shout out to Joseph Goodman. He's a great boss. He pays well, he pays timely, and he unlike some art directors, he trusts that the artists know what they're doing. He's paying us to do a job. He trusts us enough to say, like, you know how to draw, how to do your job better than I do. That's why you're doing it, not me. So I have had too many bosses over the years who seem to think that because they were the boss, they were the and excuse me. I think she's almost done here, isn't she? Other than the shading on the horns. But yeah, I've had too many bosses who thought that simply because they were the boss, that they knew how to do everything better than anyone. And unfortunately, that is rarely the case in anybody's case. I like to think that some of the jobs that I've had, I have known every trick in the book, but every once in a while, people will be like, hey, if you do this, this, and this, it'll work out better. And I'd look at it and go like, you're right. Okay. So the only thing I would have to do would, I would start doing it like that. You really can't teach an old dog new tricks. Okay. All right, folks. Looks like we are at the end of another exciting session of In the Studio with Brad. I hope you have enjoyed your time. I have enjoyed being able to share my time with you. I will have this done for you to see next week. So put in your orders for Curse of the Devil Lich so you can get your character killed by a midnight hag, and you can then boast to all your friends is like, hey, I saw this midnight hag that just killed me getting drawn. I don't know whether you'll earn any kudos from your fellow gamers, but hey, it'll be something fun. So I shall see you next week at 8 p.m. on Monday. Have a great week, guys.